Today's webinar is titled No Fear Photography, How to Get Better Photos with Every Camera. And our presenter today is RIT alumnus Ken Huth, owner of Huth Photo and public relations photographer in higher education, med tech, and theater. For over 25 years, Ken has taught thousands of people to take better photos. Ken knows the questions you have and how to keep it simple and fun. Huth Photo, based in Durham, North Carolina, does key national work for clients like Duke University, JP Morgan, and the YMCA. Huth Photo's team also makes RIT's biggest events come alive with an instant online system. While events like RIT Brick City are happening, people can see and share over 1,000 images online. We're thrilled to have alumnus Ken Huth with us. Welcome, Ken. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. How you all doing? It's great to have you involved. This is just going to be a quick hour. We're going to be moving fast, and there are going to be distinct times we're going to ask for questions. The first thing we're going to do is throw up a quick poll so we can kind of get an idea of who you folks are and what you need to know. So if you could go ahead and respond, these are the two poll questions, and I'll let you know how that turns out in a minute. And looks like we've got a nice group of people. Thanks for joining. And I want to just give you an overview of why it's called No Fear Photography. I guess what was bothering me is I was seeing people that are, they're taking photos that they're not happy with. They don't know what they can do. As cameras have gotten more, cameras have gotten better, there's some air quotes going there, people are actually a whole lot more confused about what they can do with them. And so cameras get better and photography gets less fun. So I want people to not be stressed about it, but to actually approach this as a fun thing, a simple thing, a thing that I can give you a few formulas that you can look at before you even step out of the house to take the picture, and you can enjoy yourself more. So I don't want your camera just to, sit in a closet somewhere and you do all your photos with your smartphone. I want you to actually go out, take better photos, and not be afraid of it, I guess. So let's look at what kind of cameras and everybody's doing. And I did say that this class, absolutely, 90% of what I'm talking can work on the iPhone. So you'll see in the poll results, we've got a good number of people that just using their iPhone, and that's awesome. That works, and a lot of our tips are going to work with that as well. People have snap cameras, but you'll see a real interest there. iPhones and the digital cameras, the larger SLR cameras, are the two biggest. Great, that really helps me know what's going on. And whether or not you're interested in buying a camera, the reason I'm asking that is I've got some buying tips at the end. So that just kind of helps me know, yeah, a quarter of you are pretty actively interested in that info, so I'll definitely hit that as we're going along. Now, one thing I do want to tell you, if you've ever been to another webinar, not an RIT one, these are very cool TED Talk kind of things, but some of them, they have something to sell at the end. We don't do that. This is RIT, it's education, it's a benefit to RIT alumni and to my clients, so no fear. At the end of the talk, we got nothing to sell you. All righty. So as you can see, this is some of my team in action working, and you could hopefully tell they don't look very fearful. And let's dig right into the content now. What we're going to do, let me give you the overview of the talk, is we're going to go through 4 more tech tips. Okay, we're going to simplify your camera down to just 4 buttons. Then after that, we're going to do a section of 4 creative and photo shooting tips. Then we're going to quickly hit a buying overview for those of you before you buy your next camera, so you have a little idea of what to look for and how to save some money. And then after each section, there's going to be questions. So do me a favor, it's just, I won't be able to see the chat as it scrolls by. Please just save that for the question time. And if you could save your questions to what I maybe didn't explain very well, the topic is so huge, we could go a lot of different directions. So if the questions you have are, oh, you said this and I didn't quite understand it, or how does it apply to me, that would be fantastic. So let's see, we're gonna just dig right in here next. I kind of wonder, you know, if photography feels this way to people, you know, just this mass of buttons and icons and it's a blur. Maybe you remember the good old days with a really simple camera. You kind of held up and you pushed a button. You might be old enough like me that you remember then film. You know, there wasn't a whole lot of settings to change to do film. You put the film in and away you went. So we don't want it to be confusing like this. I find that the way photography is often taught is really kind of photo theory. And so people who really want to just take a better snap or maybe just get a little bit better and start in the hobby are finding themselves being taught a bunch of numbers and how this works with this. And that's fine when you want it to be a hobby, but right now we're going to go to just getting you some better photos quickly. You know, I really am shooting for an 80% improvement, kind of like in business, you know, low-hanging fruit improvement. We're going to look at really the easy things you can do, the 4 buttons and settings that will get your photography 80% to that magical 100, you know, you love it and angels are singing photography. We can leave that 20% for when you want to go deeper into it and you want to take it as a hobby or do a class or continuing ed or something like that. So I'm going to give you these few simple formulas, and they'll be available as a PDF you can download for free and grab, that you can just plug a few numbers in and push a few buttons on your camera, and you're going to have a really good starting point. All right, so this is actually then our 4 buttons that we're going to talk about. I'm going to start off here with exposure control, and without, you know, getting too crazy about photography, exposure, and things like that, that simply means is your photo too dark or too light? That's exposure, all right? And too dark and too light, correcting that on cameras are represented with plus and minus buttons. So as we go through each of these steps, make yourself a note of what your homework will be, and finding where these buttons are on your camera is what you want to do. Now, this is an easy one on the iPhone. Instead of actually having it plus or minus, unless you have a separate camera app, on the iPhone, you simply, have you ever done it, where you tap on what the subject is, and then you can slide your finger up to make the photo brighter or slide it down? If you haven't done that yet, give it a try while you're taking a photo on your smartphone. Tap on the subject. That tells it what is important in the frame. Slide up for more exposure, that's plus. Slide down for less. Now, on other cameras that have setting controls, I'm going to show you, what they might look like. When I was talking to some people about the talk, someone even told me that this was the biggest concern for them, was just how do I get a photo that's too dark, bright enough so that I like it, or it's blown out, it's too bright, how do I straighten that out? So just learning this button is going to put you back in control. All right, so here's an example of what happens in real life. This is a RIT reunion, and I did a photo, the first one there on the left, and as you can see, the photo's too dark. The reason I could see, and this is a tip right now, is after you take the photo, quickly look at your LCD. A lot of people just kind of snap and walk away. So take the photo, it's too dark, what are you going to do about that? So you push the plus button up a little bit. All right, every camera is a little different on what each push is, but if you push the plus button a little bit, you start to brighten the image. And then on the far right, you can see I pushed it 2 clicks, and it was a little bit too bright, actually, in that image. Depends how that might look on your screen, which is the right one. But the basic idea is take a picture and look at it. If it's too dark or too light, you're going to use that plus or minus. Now, where's that at on your camera? Everybody does it a little differently. The top, you're going to hear me talk now and again a little bit about Fuji mirrorless cameras. That's on a Fuji camera. One of the reasons I love these cameras for teaching photography and somebody who wants to go learn just a little bit to be better is these cameras have a mechanical dial right on top of the camera, and you can see if you turn it, you're starting to go plus, partially, plus another part, plus 1, so plus a third, 2. And that, every time you do that, is brightening your image. or a little bit less commonly, if your image is too bright, you can dial down to the negative. Down below that, a different kind of a camera, this would be like an SLR from Nikon. Doesn't matter, Canon's pretty similar. You have to do two things. You have to find the plus minus button, and then on the right, you see they're trying to tell you you have to spin a wheel. So it can get a little bit complicated trying to explain different cameras, but find the plus and minus and just figure out how you can change your exposure that way. The second key setting after plus and minus in your exposure is ISO. Once again, I'm not trying to go into technical things to confuse you. We're going to keep it nice and simple. Your ISO is simply how sensitive is your camera to light. All right, and believe it or not, that's variable. In the old days of film, it only had one number. If it was 400 film, it was 400 ISO and you couldn't change it. Digital cameras, though, we have the ability to change that. So what happens is if you get into a dark situation like this room, people will say, well, I did the plus button and the photo wasn't getting any lighter. That might be because then your ISO number isn't high enough. So what you can do is you can actually increase that number, and I'm going to show you that in the next couple of slides, and that makes your camera more sensitive to light. And then you might say, well, you know, why don't we just do that all the time and have your camera always super sensitive to light? Well, if you walk outside on a really bright day, what's going to happen is it's not going to get a very good photo because there's so much light out there. And the other thing, you might be familiar with this from your digital photos, and you can even see it a little bit in this photo. When you are at higher ISOs, it starts to get a little grainy, you know, and a little kind of gnarly in there. So let's look at a few examples. This is the too dark example. This is, once again, setting up for an RIT President's Ball. And take a snap, look at the LCD on the back of my camera, and I go, ah, that's too dark. What am I going to do? Well, I can't just push plus because I'm indoors, and pushing plus can only do so much without making your camera more sensitive. So you can put the ISO up to be a little more sensitive, and then it's able to get a better photo. So that's kind of the two ways, the two things you can find on your camera, plus minus button and how you set the ISO to get a much better exposure. Where it's at on your camera is going to vary, but you're looking for a menu kind of like this, something that will say ISO speed. And we're going to talk here, the auto setting actually really isn't bad. One of the newer ideas is not forcing you to say, I want a certain ISO right now, but, you know, camera, if you think there's enough light, you can pick a smaller number, which would give you nicer quality photos and not be blown out by the sun. Oh, camera, you know, I'm indoors and it's dark. You know what, go ahead, just push it a little higher. And as you're taking photos and looking at them, you'll start to say, oh, well, here, take a look. You can see the auto range here goes all the way up to 12,800. That's where you start to get pretty grainy looking photos. You'll learn on your camera. You know what, I'm going to tell the camera, use auto, but don't go to such a high number because I'm not quite happy with the quality there. So that's auto ISO. You can set it manually yourself if you want to. You'll see that that's on my formula tip sheets that are coming up. And so one more thing for you to find, and here comes the third button you're looking for, the third setting, and that's white balance. So I want you to kind of start to look at your photos and think about, is the color look good or bad? Is it really yellow and people's skin looks green? And, you know, it can be subtle at times. But if you look at this photo, now this has already been corrected, so, you know, we shot the inside to look nice and clean and bright, right? It doesn't look like a lot of times under fluorescent light. It might look yellowish or greenish or like that. So we've corrected for that. You can look at the sky and see, well, the sky's actually a little unnaturally blue because we've corrected for the interior of the building. You don't have to worry too much about that. We're going to tell you, once again, in the formulas what you're going to set. One thing I was kind of wondering, and maybe you could just give me a shout in the chat box, so can you see, there's really a third kind of color light here that is happening in the photo in the lower part. Does anybody want to just bang out something in the chat and let me know, do you see what's going on in the bottom of that photo? And let me just make sure I can see whatever you're all saying. Let's see. No, actually, I can't see that part. So that's all right. We'll just, I think we'll just do that as, let me just go here.
Ken, there's no comments as of now. Is there?
Oh.
Oh, yes, there is. Okay, we're here. Do you see it? Muted, let's see. Street lights, shadow, sodium vapor, question mark?
Hey, that's perfect. Okay, and thank you for reading those off to me. Yeah, I don't see them, so I'm just, that's okay. There's only once or twice, and you folks are exactly right. So there are street lights, and you can see at the bottom of the photo, and there are some shadows too. So one thing to kind of take on as a bit of trying to improve your photos is start to see on the back of your camera, does the color look like you would like it to look? You know, is the color of people's skin tone or the room match what you think you're seeing in real life? And you can see here then on the bottom, that's kind of street light, sodium vapor is the technical term that makes it that kind of orangey blue. So start to see the color, and then you can start to correct the color. If you see here, this is a test photo we were doing during, once again, RIT reunion, and they were having an international fair near some windows inside one of the buildings. So I started out on daylight because it's, you know, sun coming in the windows, right? When you look at this photo, though, it might be subtle to a lot of people that don't think much about it, but the color really isn't great. And think to yourself, what color is that? How do their skin tones look? What, you know, how do you feel about that as a photo? And then you can see here when I corrected from saying it was a sunny day to saying, no, I'm actually a little bit more in a cloud or shade situation, the camera automatically adds a little bit of warmth and brightens it up, because standing in the shade, if you think about it, is kind of cool light, just like that cool light of evening. So what you're going to be doing then is finding the white balance on your camera, and this is going to be somewhere in the menu. Once again, unfortunately, this is one of the trickier things to find. Some cameras have a Q menu, which is quick menu that you can quickly find things. Really encourage you to, you know, have some really useful things in there, like your white balance should be there. So let me tell you what these symbols are, because I got to tell you, they get confusing for people. Starting on the left is automatic white balance, which is the devil, and I'll explain why later. Next to it is sun, sunny day. So you're going to see in my formula, I'm going to recommend you set your white balance on sunny day when you go outside. You'll also see going across here, that's the shade of a building, so you're standing in shade. Then following over to the right is cloud for a cloudy day. So those are all your outside choices. Sunny day, it's I'm in the shade, or cloudy day. Each one adds different amounts of yellow to your photo to get rid of the blue of being on a cloudy day. Then we move on to some indoor settings, and you can see that's a picture of a light bulb. More often where you're really going to use that is going to be on a stage. That's like if your kids or somebody is up on stage and there's stage lighting on them, that's tungsten. Or in a room that is just lit with old school tungsten bulbs. LED bulbs are a lot cleaner, they don't end up so yellow. So that corrects for that. You're telling the camera, I know what kind of light this is, you set the white balance, and you get a much better looking photo. The last one's a fluorescent light bulb, and you know that most office or out environments, you know, are using that. So, and some cameras even have 2 or 3 different fluorescent choices to correct for. And then on the right of that is flash. If you're using flash, your camera says, okay, I know kind of flash isn't perfect color either, I'll correct it. You can not worry about the right 2. Those are professional settings. And back to what's up with white balance, auto white balance on the far left, and why I really dislike it. And I kind of get mad when photographers work with me and they leave it on auto, is that you probably know when you grab your smartphone and you point it at something, how often it gets the exposure wrong, and the color wrong. Cameras just really aren't that good at that yet. So in a lot of environments, it'll pick a very wrong color and very often tends like really blue. So it only takes a second to say, I'm out in the sun, put it on sunny. You'll get a lot better photos that way. The other thing with auto white balance is when you're in a situation like you're shooting some flash indoor, a lot of times it'll misread what's going on in the room and how much your flash is actually putting out some pretty nice light, and it'll make people look kind of blue, kind of ashen, if you've ever seen that happen. So please just stay away from auto white balance and just manually set it yourself. You'll see that the tips on that are right in the formula, so you don't have to think too much about it. The fourth button we're going to talk about, and the final one, is your camera modes, and I'm going to explain what that is in a second. There are times when you want to do something a little bit nicer with your photo, and you want to maybe, like this photo, you want to have a little more creative blur, let the background show up a little bit more, there's some neat lights in the photo, things like this. This is a fun photo, by the way. This was at an event Wegmans does to help raise money for Hillside Children's Center. And so in your camera, these might have, and I'm going to show you in just a second what the letters are, but they might be called something like portrait mode or sports mode, or they might actually be more than the camera professional names that are P for program, T or F for time or shutter, A for aperture, M for manual. Some people are familiar that, you know, professionals are really into manual, that kind of thing. All right, so let's just run through these modes quickly. You'll find them if you have like a digital SLR. And an SLR, by the way, is the kind of lens camera that you can take the lens on and off, the bigger cameras. If you have that, excuse me, grab a quick sip. Or if you have a mirrorless camera, those modes are there. If you have a snapshot camera, it's usually a menu item that you can set some of these for either sport or portrait, and some of these like shutter. So the first place you start is the P, program mode. You don't need to know what it does, just relax. All it does is it sets everything for you, okay? It takes care of setting everything, and that's the starting point to doing a little bit more with your photography. Falling back one from that, if you look underneath there is the full auto, and that's a green box on most cameras. And you know, that's the, oh no, what happened? I can't take a picture. It's completely screwed up. What am I going to do? You could put it on that. It sets your camera sort of to factory neutral, and that's sort of a fail-safe setting. So the problem with using it compared to program, though, is some of these things I'm telling you, like setting your own white balance or changing your ISO, may not be available in full auto. So program is the place, really, that you're going to start then. Now, why would you use the couple of other modes, the TV or shutter priority mode and the AV aperture mode? When would you use those? Well, if you're in a situation like this, do you want to do something like stop action, your kids are in sports or whatever, or you're trying to get photos of something moving fast, or on the flip side, if you want to do something that's a little slower and get something a little creative with some blur in there, you're going to want to use the shutter mode. On Canon, that's a TV, or S on other cameras. You're just trying to find shutter mode. So when you think of shutter, think speed. It handles speed well. It stops things that are moving fast, and it lets things blur that kind of give you that little bit of sense of time for the photo. So that's why you would use it. You don't have to use it if you don't want to, but if you're trying to expand what you're doing, that's why it's there. It gives you total control over how much action you're stopping in the photo. Now, here's an example on an actual camera. You can see at the bottom of the wheel is the green, you know, auto everything box. That's just for, oh my goodness, I don't know what's going on. Please set your camera on P to get started with the formulas we're using, and then you can see the time value or shutter and aperture priority right there. So your tasks, is to find these things on your camera. Where is the plus and minus, and how do you set it so that you could do that at any point when a photo is too dark or too light? How do you change your ISO or put it onto an auto ISO you're happy with? Where's the white balance at? You only really have to do that once on a shoot. Before you walk out the door, you can say, I'm doing photos on a sunny day or a cloudy day. Set it and forget it. You're good for that whole day. And then where are the modes on your camera, and do you want to experiment a little bit with that? Now let's hit the last two modes. And this one here is controlled by your aperture. So when people say to me, you know, oh, that's a very professional looking photo, think to yourself, you know, what do people mean by a very professional looking photo? Often what it means is the subject's really sharp and the background has that kind of nice, creamy, soft background. So what that's controlled by is the A mode, your aperture on your lens. And you'll see my formulas actually will tell you a little bit about that if you want to use it. So if you want to take notes, the idea is if you have a small number set with the A, you put your button on A, you spin a wheel to put it to a small number like 2.8 or 4 compared to 8 or 16 or 22, you will have less in focus behind people, less trees sticking out of people's heads, and it really gives you that nice focus, and people will say, oh, your photos are sharp and the backgrounds are nice and soft. That's what that's all about then. The corollary to that is someone said to me, oh, I'd like to get more in focus in a photo. Well, then that's going to be a large number. You go onto the A mode, you set a large number by spinning your wheel wherever it's at, and a large number makes a large amount of your subject area be in focus, like you want some foreground in focus or background, or you've got a group of people and the people in the front and in the back of the group you want in focus. So that's how you do that with aperture mode. And then manual mode is really when you want full control. You're taking a photo course, you want to do more with that, and that's you setting everything, and your camera's really not involved to be a fail-safe for you. When you set the aperture or the shutter mode, the camera will always be trying to give you a nice exposure that looks good, and it'll get as close as it can. When you go manual, you could set the camera in a way that you aren't even close on exposure, and the camera says, it's your thing, you do it. You told me you want to be manual. So save that if you want to be taking a course or learning more things. It's most normal people, they're not going to want to mess with that. Now, I've got to say, wouldn't that make now your photos that 80% better? If you've got photos that you can get the right exposure, bright and dark, colors that are more pleasing and accurate, the photos aren't blurred if someone's moving, you know how to correct for that, that's really going to get you so far ahead. And all it is after this talk, looking at your camera and jot down where those 4 buttons are, and then you're ready to go. Okay, so we're going to move right on to the formulas, and then we'll do our first question and answer, okay? So if you want to start thinking about, was there something just super not clear in there that you need, just let me know. The formulas are, there's PDF sheets for this, and you'll be sent a link so that you can grab those. And we're not going to go through these in depth, but all you have to do to take this formula is look at the buttons I told you about, excuse me, and set your camera accordingly. So I'll use this first one as an example, okay? On an outdoor normal day, you could set your ISO either to automatic or to 200. You find your white balance, and you could set it to daylight or cloudy, whatever kind of day it is. And if you set your aperture priority mode to A and an aperture or a small number like 4 or 5.6, it's going to keep, the things in the background from being, too distracting. And if the photos are too dark, you just find those plus or minus buttons and you make the corrections with those. So that's what you would do, on an outdoor day. So you could set your camera to this anytime right before you even walk out and take photos, and it'll be ready to go for you. And then I'm going to run you through quickly, just show you the other formulas, but you can have those on a PDF. It'll be all set. So in this case, then, here's what you would do doing indoor photos with no flash. Once again, you'll see I'm talking about your ISO, your white balance, the mode you're in, and if the photo's too dark or too light. Indoor flash is going to be, a little bit different again. What do you set your white balance to? What's your ISO going to be? That's one of the few cases where I don't say to use auto ISO because it often trips up using a flash. All right, now would be a good time to take a question or two. Cindy, would you like to ask?
Yep, Ken, there are two questions that came in. One is from Gary. He's asking about pictures involving snow. What auto white balance settings should he use? Oh,
that's a terrific question. Great, that's exactly right, because, I don't have a formula for that. But there are two things you're going to find that happen in snow, and a similar version happens in sand. So white balance in snow, the nature of snow in a winter day is very blue. So once again, just for fun, start to kind of think about that. You could picture, wow, I'm in Florida. That's kind of yellow and warm. Snow looks kind of cool and blue. So even though you may not be standing in shade or a cloudy day, that's the closest thing to it. So you'd want to set something. You could start out with your camera on sunny, but then I really imagine you're going to be on cloudy or shade to get rid of that blue of snow. The other thing that happens, snow and sand, is your photos very naturally get dark. Without going to the tech of it, your camera's goal is to look at the whole scene and kind of make it this one gray it's looking for. It's a long story. In fact, the joke was at RIT that that was originally decided because they just put the original light meters pointing at the sky, and that was gray. So that's how we knew that gray was decided to be the right, balance of brightness and darkness. So when you're shooting photos in sand or snow, your camera wants to see gray, but there's something really bright. It darkens your photos down. So do pay a lot of attention to your plus and minus, and I bet in snow photos or in sand photos, you're going to be hitting the plus button. How about one more question before we zip on, Cindy?
All right, another question came in from Mark. He wants to know, is there a particular brand of camera that is the best when it comes to auto white that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I'm going to deal a little bit more with brands at the end. The good news is most brands are great today. I will tell you that the newer the camera, the better the automatic is, and automatic white balance is better indoors in a fluorescent lit room than any other time, and it's okay outdoors on the average day. Do you have, that was quick. Do you have one more before we move on?
Yeah, Susan wants to know if someone has a window behind them, what would she do to adjust for that?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, and that goes back to what we were saying about sunny day, snowy day or whatever. It's almost like a snowy day. It's a whole lot of light, and your camera says, I like gray, and that's not gray. And it tries to make it gray by darkening your photo. So that is your plus minus button. So what's going to happen is you can do two things. You can look at the back of your screen and say, oh, wow, that's too dark. Plus, and you're going to plus your exposure. The second thing you can do is the most professional tip you'll hear is we just don't put ourselves in bad situations. We take the person and move them a little bit. So if at all possible, just have the person move. If you can't, that's going to be the plus minus settings you're going to use. All right, we're going to have another session of questions in a minute, but I want to make sure I get through the bulk of this with you. So thanks for those awesome questions. And the second section then is more the softer creative things. Previously, we were talking kind of tech. Now we're talking a little bit more about just how to get a little bit of a better photo. And we're going to talk about the idea of taking a photo versus making a photo. I really like to say that you should make a photo, not just take it. Making a photo is kind of controlling the situation, moving that person away from the window if at all possible. So the ways that you can make a photo, really just look at the situation when you're there. What's going on? Is something sticking out of people's head? I can't tell you how many times I'm on photo shoots and there's like a bathroom sign behind people or whatever. You know, just be aware of the environment. You can move people. You can get people out of really bright sun where they're squinting and move them into the shade, or turn them around so the sun's not hitting them as hard. You can, you know, move people, like I said, away from backgrounds or whatever the bad situation is. So actively be involved in getting the photo. Don't just walk up and snap, I took a photo, okay? And we did the questions, okay? So my number one tip then for making good photos is actually how many photos you're taking, all right? You can't get to making photos without blowing through a lot of images. And when you're in a situation, if you're not, in fact, let me back up just a second and show you. If you're in a situation like this and you're just taking one photo, say just of the graduate, you know, that might not really be telling the story, and maybe it's not technically very good. So I really encourage people to take 3 photos. That's what the take 3 part of this is. So your first shot, you get somewhere, you see the photo, you don't want to miss it, you take your normal photo. Got it. You don't want to miss the picture. But then look at the back of your camera and see how it looks. Did somebody blink? Is the background bad? Whatever. And take a second photo, kind of correcting for any of that, or plus and minus a little bit if needed, okay? And then the third photo I'd like to encourage you is, as we talk about some of the creative things, maybe take a third photo that's a little more interesting, and we'll be talking about, you know, some ways to do that then in a second. If you look at this then, this is part of the taking 3,000. You take 3 in each situation, and please get quick at it. But in the long term, taking 3,000 is, stop feeling like, you know, pixels cost money. It's not like film anymore. Really, without being annoying to people, take 3 quick photos, maybe take 3 and let them go about their way and do a few shots of whatever they're doing next. And as you're taking more photos and getting more volume, you'll find you kind of loosen up with your photography and have a little more fun with it. You're going to learn better where those controls on your camera are, and how to just quickly react and grab them and make those change. And they'll make you grow and become a more creative photographer. And then when you get back to your home, and please, this is a huge tip. This is a note for you. At home, review your shoot. Don't just like dump your photos and never look at them. If you really want to get better at photography, if you just take 10 minutes after you put them on your computer, or as you're looking at them at the end of the event on your phone, think about what worked, what didn't, and then don't just get mad and say, oh, it worked or didn't, but say, well, why didn't it work? Oh, that was too dark. I got to remember plus or minus again. Wow, all of these are yellow. I really should have set it to tungsten. People are kind of green. I should have set it for fluorescent. And if you don't know what the answer it is, then you can, you know, just Google it. There's a million. Photography is a great topic to learn on YouTube or on the web. So really look at how your shoot went and work on making better photos. Now, as you do your 3 photos, you're capturing that moment in the first frame so you don't miss anything, right? But then also don't be afraid to redo it. The first frame of this was, I saw them, you know, kissing grandma, did the quick photo of that. They were just then, you know, standing there. I got a version that was just a portrait of them. You know, you can also take control and say, well, you know what, move a little bit so the light's hitting you better. As you're doing each of these things, you don't have to be afraid to take that control, redo the moment, ask people to do what you need, ask somebody to give somebody a kiss, whatever. Unless you're a newspaper photographer, those people can't do it. But in terms of public relations and all of our snapshots, you can do whatever you want to do. Now, do learn your camera and get fast. The most frustrating thing I see happening is when somebody's even trying to get that first photo and the batteries aren't charged for the flash, or they don't know how to make a change, that frustrates your subject, and that really comes through in the photo. So learn your camera and how to quickly make those 4 changes on it, and really only 3 because white balance is the same through your whole shoot. And don't be afraid to tell people, hey, I'm going to take 3 quick snaps, and then they're prepared for 1, 2, 3. And then also you can, try to have a variety. This is just kind of a raw pile of photos from a shoot and what it might look like. And, in terms of 3,000, there's a lot of different things you can do in each environment to tell a story. So try to do more than just the one shot that's happening there in front of you. Creative tip number 2 is you're going to get close to things. One of the biggest things I see people is they hang back. They're afraid to really get up and get in there. It does. It feels different. The photos feel different. People react differently. And I just really don't see people, doing that very much. Robert Capa said, if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. And that's not just technically, you could zoom in more. There's a different feeling to being right there with people and engaging with them. And then I really want to challenge you now that you've gotten close to get closer, because you're probably not really that close as you think you are, because it feels like, I'm getting kind of close to the subject. Get closer and just try to see what happens when you get closer to people and you have a little bit of fun like that. The third tip, more creative shots, is getting up and getting down. We don't just look at the world standing, or normalize every day at a normal, whatever your height level is. That's boring, and photos from that level all the time tend to be boring as well. Just photos are more interesting if it's from an angle people don't know. So get a photo from above. Get on a chair. I'm always jumping up on furniture, telling people don't do this at home, but, it makes a great photo. Of course, you can hold your camera up. A tip for buying a camera, one of the nice features now is a lot of them have the LCD that you see how your photos are. They swivel out now or pivot so you can hold them above your head or hold them down low and get a nicer photo. It's terrific. So here's an example of getting low, especially great with kids. You're down on people's level. It's not the angle people normally see. It's a lot more engaging to be down on a lower level with people. And this is from the same shoot. This is a shot from above. We actually have a camera we put on a pole. We can run it wireless using an iPhone app and snap the photo when it looks good on the iPhone. And, anything you can show people that's not the normal photo, that could be that third creative picture you're taking then. And then when you put the 2 things together, when you're kind of in close to something and down low where they don't always see, it kind of really makes people feel like, you're in the picture, you're right there. And then also just creatively, you're showing people what you want them to see. In this particular, photo, I thought the shoes and the gestures and using the tack and the snuggle, were interesting sort of things. My art blog, by the way, is Nifty Durham, N-I-F-T-Y, like in the 50s, N-I-F-T-Y-D-U-R-H-A-M. I live in Durham, North Carolina. So niftydurham.com if you like to see these kind of just fun street photography kind of things. Now, the last thing isn't necessarily a creative tip, but I'm sneaking it in with the creative tips because it's critical, and that is to get everything reset. It's a lifesaver if once you're leaving the situation, you reset your camera to neutral. Maybe use something like the sunny day neutral, or if you're indoors more, one of the indoor neutrals. But when you're taking pictures, you're plussing and minusing. You might be changing modes and things. The next time you pick it up, you're going to forget what you had done. So reset your camera as you're leaving the event so that when you get home, it's neutral and you can pick it up and you're really close to getting a good photo, not saying, now why are all my photos too bright? Oh, the plus and minus is wrong. So please do that. A couple more things that are just good practice is to reset your camera dump the photos immediately. So transfer your photos to your computer constantly when you get home, back them up, and don't just leave them on your card where you might accidentally erase them or like that. Charge your batteries up as soon as you get home so you're ready to go the next time you grab your camera. So really to summarize then, and you can think of a couple more questions we can do. To summarize, I want to say, you know, these tips can be done then on an iPhone. You know, you really can do making versus taking with any camera. It's not the camera, and I know pro photographers say that all the time, and then you buy a $6,000 camera. But it's the same pictures I'm taking on my iPhone or my smaller snap camera, the same things I'm using, the same tools or the same things you're using with whatever camera you're doing. It's really not the camera. So you can get closer no matter what phone you're or what camera you're using, like a phone. You could take 3 photos. You could take 3,000 so you get better at it. And how about a couple more questions, Cindy?
And some questions came in back on your talk around camera settings. So Joshua was curious about, do those formulas, those same formulas that you shared previously, do they apply when shooting in black and white?
Great, that's a good question. So in black and white, obviously you don't have to worry about your white balance. Black and white is a little different with exposure, but you're still going to be doing your plussing and minusing, so you know that would be a similar way of working. The other settings, yes, would be pretty similar because what you're doing is you're trying to get a photo with a good exposure. So other than the ones that deal with the actual flash, and let me just take a quick peek here. The ISO is similar. You could ignore white balance. The modes are similar. And then just remember your pluses or minuses. And in black and white, actually, sometimes you're pushing the pluses a little bit more than you would in color because that contrast looks nice. So next question.
Yep, Carol has a question. She writes that she takes a lot of pictures in front of water, like a lake. The people in the foreground are always too dark. How does she correct for this?
That's a good question. It probably, and it depends on how much light or sun is behind them, and that's definitely a plus or minus issue. So take the first photo, look at the camera on the back of your camera, the LCD or your phone, and go, a little too dark, plus or minus, or tap on them as the subject and raise that to the plus. That simple setting will change everything. You don't even have to be in a different mode or anything. Plus minus will make a big difference for you. Got one more for me?
Yeah, a couple have come in that are very specific to camera types. I'm thinking maybe we can hold those till you get to brands. But
yeah, let me.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, let's do that. Let's hold that.
All right. There is a question about correcting for a black dog that always seems to look too dark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So that is plus or minus. But just to warn you, when you're plussing for something, especially like a person in a black tuxedo, a black dog, it does increase the exposure of the whole scene, so what's around them might get a little too bright, but that's a plus or minus issue as well, and that would be the way I'd start to handle that. And okay, great, thanks for those questions. We're gonna have one more round of questions at the end. I'm just gonna quickly zip through some bonus questions because I don't wanna run out of time for your questions at the end. I just wanted to show you that choosing lenses can be a really interesting part of what we do. Your camera probably has a zoom lens, even your iPhone zooms, and the newer one now has a little bit more of a zoom. So your lens choice can really affect what you're doing. So here's a very wide angle lens, zoomed out, and I'm up in nice and close. Here's zooming in longer. So that's making that background softer. If you want to try, do 2 photos, wide and then zoom in and see how that looks. Using a wide lens just to get more into the photo, trying to do it for, you know, maybe a more creative reason. Often a wide angle lens is needed more for your snapshot camera or something you're doing in the family, because a lot of times you're trying to get photos indoors or at the restaurant or your house or a group of friends. You need that wide. So when you're looking at zoom lenses buying a camera, don't just listen to what they're telling you about how far it zooms. Also pay a little attention to, are they telling you it's a nice wide angle as well? And one thing just to avoid, if they're trying to tell you the camera really zooms X amount and it has this digital zoom, you can ignore digital zoom. That's just marketing talk. Digital zoom, you could just essentially go in on your computer and crop the photo in closer. So you really just want real zoom there. All right. Then beyond that, I wanted to tell you to turn around, look at what's really going on around you. Don't just look at what is the expected photo of the moment, and have some fun with it. Engage with people. Really enjoy being part of it. Don't miss out on that. And also, I love photography for humor. I don't know how well you can see on your screen, but this is here in part of rural North Carolina. Here's the Friendly Grow grocery store. And on the right it says, no loitering, no littering, no alcoholic beverages on premises, no bike, no skateboarding, 10-minute parking limit, towing enforced. And also to just wait for some things to happen. If you really want to go beyond just taking snaps to making a photo, wait for some things to come together when you see a fun environment like these signs. And, you know, something good's going to happen if you just do that. All righty, now we've got buying tips. Which camera should I buy? So we'll do about 5 minutes on this, and then we'll be just ready to wrap up with your questions. The good news is we're talking about brands. There really isn't a specific brand anymore that's critical. You know the big ones, Canon and Nikon, they're fabulous, but really any camera that you're going to find now that is a name brand, the Fujis are great, Sony's fine, and Olympus, and whatever they are, cameras are at a fabulous level right now, so don't worry about that. You're not going to make a huge mistake based on brand. Pick a camera that's easy to find the buttons I told you about, and that varies wildly, and nobody talks about it. So try to find a camera that you can easily change your exposure or find your white balance easily, okay? I'm going to teach you in a second about the camera types, so that's coming up in just about 2 slides here then. The first tip, though, is I think could help save you a little bit of money, and that is cameras refurbished are actually really good right now, and there is, I think they're going to send you the link, and if not, it's in my PDF. Canon has an entire website you could buy refurbished digital Rebel camera, and it's going to be fine. If it's refurbished by the manufacturer, Canon or Nikon, it's a great way to save like 20% on things. Now, what is a yes when you're buying your camera? There's a lot of no's, but what should you be spending your money on when you buy the camera? I encourage you to make sure you're getting good batteries for your flash, and I want you to have a flash. That's coming up too. Good quality nickel metal hydride NIMH batteries. Have 2 sets, so you can always have one in your flash and one charging. 2 sets of camera batteries. Always have a second one charged up so you don't miss things. One of the newest features that are coming along now is having Wi-Fi in your camera. Definitely, that is a game changer to have that in so that you're not just using your phone for your social snaps. You can use a camera that's taking beautiful photos, push a button and have it on your phone. And then if you're searching for different lenses and you want to actually go and compare them, the lens that has the smaller f-stop, that's the aperture. Don't worry too much about it, just write it down. If it has a smaller f number, that's a better lens for you. So if you have a choice between a lens that's a 2.8 or an f4 and you're trying to make a decision and things are similar, the 2.8 is going to let more light in. A lot of times lenses are darker, a bigger number when you zoom in, so don't be surprised that it's a 2.8/4, but the smaller number is worth more money if that's what you can find. I definitely want you to get one on the right, these little glass UV protectors to keep your expensive lens from getting scratched. And the biggest improvement you can make technically is to buy a flash you can put on your camera and notice how it can tip up toward the ceiling and start to practice bouncing. It's going to take $80, $100 to get a flash, but in terms of what you can do with indoor photos, very simply, your flash will talk to your camera and get good exposure, much, much nicer pictures. What don't you need is you don't really need the kits. All the things thrown in that they do, they're really pretty low value. You are going to need a camera card, but most of the time just live with your camera for a while and see what you feel like you're missing. After you've got batteries, flash, you've protected your lens with a filter, you know, and a good camera card. Get 2 camera cards so that you can erase one and take pictures and put the other away and then swap, like an A and B set, so that you're not recording over your last photos, just in case your computer crashes. And then there's lots of great places to do research. You can click on the links if they're in the Finder or get it on the PDF. One of my favorite sites is Digital Photo Review. And the 3 types of cameras you need to know so you can actually think about these things. On the left, digital SLR, that's the big ones, you can change lenses. On the top is a compact or snapshot camera. And in the middle is the newest change in photography. It's the mirrorless cameras, or 3/4 cameras they're called. I love those, especially the ones that you can set things more clearly on. So the reason the big camera would have the best quality, it's the highest price, and do you really want to carry something that heavy? Snapshot camera, the quality isn't quite as good, but it's a step up from your phone. And I really feel like that mirrorless, like the Fuji mirrorless, are the sweet spot in between. There are some books and things that I have linked in the PDF for you. There's lots of learning you can do online, but let's wrap up with a few questions.
Okay, very quickly, Jessica's curious, do you have any lens type recommendations for product photography?
Really, for anybody, I'm not afraid of zoom lenses. In the old days, they used to tell you to do that, but if you can get a lens that has macro, and macro means you can focus on something closer and make it bigger in the frame, that's a real value to you, so definitely do it. Macro is a good feature and would help you.
When do you use a lens, or I'm sorry, when do you use lens hoods?
That's a good question. A lens hood is meant to keep sun or lights from bouncing around and glaring in your image. And the other nice thing about a lens hood, I keep one on all the time, is if you accidentally whack your lens into something, you hurt the $10 plastic hood, not the lens. So it is worth keeping on your lens.
Okay. One question came in back on the settings. There was a question around applying certain settings for night shots, moon or lightning. Do you have any thoughts on?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a little beyond what we're doing, but you would want to have a tripod or some way to keep the camera steady, and you're going to you're going to let it go for a longer amount of time. So when I'm talking about the speed of the time, that's a shutter setting. And if you just research a little bit online, say you want to have camera settings for fireworks or camera settings for lightning or like that, you'll find something.
All right, what camera card speeds do you recommend, Ken? John wants to know.
Yeah. Great question. Camera cards, really it doesn't cost that much more to get whatever is the fastest card. You can do a little research online if you want to geek out about it, but on Amazon, really the fastest card for the money, what you don't want to do is have a card that's thrown in that has a very low speed number. It's not that expensive. I think it's more important with video, and more importantly than is it the ultra fastest professional card is, please get at least 2 cards and take pictures on one and let the other one sit with your photos from last week and then switch them so you always have a backup.
All right, well, it's 1 o'clock. We're on the hour, so there are additional questions. We will capture those and we'll connect with Ken offline and try to get some answers back out to you all. You register with an email address so we can reach you. So Ken, I wanted to thank you. And actually, if there are any additional questions, please email them to ritalum@rit.edu, and again, we'll try to get you some answers. Ken, I want to thank you very, very much for your clearly very engaging presentation. A lot of questions still to be answered. And we thank you, the audience, for joining us today. There is a webinar next week on mastering your money and being debt-free at 33. So if you're not 33, tune in, and if you are already past 33, there's still hope. So with that, I'm going to fly. Thank you all again for coming, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.